In terms of what we see going forward, over the period of the next 5 years, at a UK level, we think that there can be price growth of 25%. But you can only have that price growth once. So the more price growth we see in the short term, the less we're likely to see at the back end of the next 5 years. And that raises the question as to when will the market slow and what will be the triggers for that slowing. There are already some things in the system which would suggest that the market will slow. Mortgage market review is high amongst them. The prospect of interest rate rises is another. And it's the timing of those interest rate rises perhaps that will dictate the pace at which we see that market slow. Clearly, one thing is absolutely for sure, it's on the radar of the Bank of England, it's on the radar of the policymakers, and so I would expect to see some form of policy response in the short term. One of the other factors which affects the housing market is the political dimension to it. And what you will often see is that in the run-up to a general election, there is a slight reluctance amongst people to move, which can act as a natural cooling in the housing market. Now, clearly housing has risen significantly up the political agenda of late, and I think that means there will be a real impact in some markets. Not least of those is the prime central London market, where there is ongoing talk about the taxation of high-value property. And I suspect that that will mean that price growth in that market this year is significantly lower than it's been previously. And indeed, in election year, we may see some small falls in prices in that particular market. What happens thereafter is really dependent upon who gets into government and exactly what their policy is. One of the interesting things that we've seen lately is we've seen a shift, for example, in the way that the Liberal Democrats would look at the taxation of high-value property. They've previously very closely tied themselves to a wealth tax based on the value in excess of £2 million. They are now beginning to look at an alternative through the council tax system. But we don't know how they'll implement it, and we don't know what the scale of the charges will be, but it's very interesting to see that there is at least some shift within that.